Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Welcome to a webinar which is brought to you by TalentLMS in a way that it will help you see the value of your investments and, of course, the way to track and find success with the platform. Let's cut to the chase. We have a lot to talk about and a special guest today. So let me just introduce myself to begin with. I'm Theo. I'm part of the customer enablement team, and I work with customers trying to help them set up their portal and, again, utilize TalentLMS to find success no matter their training requirements. Just a note before we move forward, this session is recorded and you will receive the recording once it's over, and you're more than welcome to share it with anybody who wants to attend a session that will help them track, find success, and of course, present it to stakeholders. Remember, this is a question and answer live session as well. So we are more than happy to receive your questions. Feel free to use the Q&A in your meeting controls and send us your questions. We'll do our best to answer as many as possible during the session. And of course, we can always follow up with you for the rest. Now, we have two special guests today. We have Greg Daines, leading expert on customer churn and CEO of ChurnRX. And Greg has done extensive research and is helping companies solve customer churn and, of course, build durable growth. So we have a lot to learn today. And also we have Danny Morris, who is our own teammate. Danny has a wealth of experience in account management. And for more than 6 years, pretty much, he has been helping customers achieve their goals with the solutions that he has offered. The last year, he's been part of TalentLMS, and he has helped numerous customers see the results of their investment. So welcome, both of you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's see what we have on the plate today. We have a lot to talk about. First, how to pitch an LMS to your stakeholders, because many times we know the solution is great, but how do we present it? And how do we present it with a way that the results will be trackable, shown, and of course, easy to display. Then we'll talk about the ins and outs of the customer results strategy, also known as CRS. And lastly, we will see real cases of customer results strategy success with our customers. And that is something that we can also encourage you to start thinking about before pitching your LMS solution to your stakeholders. And of course, the live Q&A that we promised. So your questions are always welcome. Now, I'm going to leave screen sharing, mute my mic, and leave the floor to Greg.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me. This is going to be fun. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm actually going to start by talking a little bit about that research that Theo was talking about. It turns out my background is I was a founder CEO in the SaaS world, but I had this experience over and over again that kind of drove me crazy, which was I would have a customer leave and on the way out tell me what a great experience it was working with my company. And I used to think, well, that doesn't make sense. If you're satisfied with the experience, why are you leaving, right? But I also had another experience, which is customers would complain and be frustrated and unsatisfied, and yet they would keep renewing their contract. And both of these things kind of drove me crazy because they challenge our basic fundamental theory about what matters in business and even beyond that. And so I started to collect data to try to figure out, was my anecdotal experience something that you could see in the data? Is it common? And well, yeah, it turns out it is. So I'm going to talk about the first piece of research that I found, that I created actually, which was this idea that customer satisfaction drives success and long-term customer loyalty. It's just wrong. Now you may be wondering, what does this have to do with getting a plan in place and helping people adopt an LMS and succeed with it? I'll get there, just patience for a few minutes. So the first piece of research that I encountered that seemed to confirm what I had been experiencing was something that was done by a group called the CEB. They did this huge study. This is quite old now. It's probably 11 years old now, where they basically said, like, what's the relationship between how satisfied customer says they are and how long they stay? And you'd expect something like this, right? If their low satisfaction would be low loyalty, the customer wouldn't stick around very long. Or high satisfaction, high loyalty, they'd stick around a long time. But it turns out the data actually looked like this. So it turned out there was actually no correlation, no relationship that they could find between how satisfied people said they were and how long they stuck around. That was a shock. That was not what they expected. And but it matched my experience. It seemed to confirm something I had been experiencing on a daily basis. And so over the last several years, I've been able to gather a much bigger data set, partly because of the work we do at ChurnRX. We do all these analyses. So we have the world's largest customer retention database. Nothing like it's ever been accumulated before, millions of records. And we basically also had this thing happen where everyone, all the businesses in the world decided to adopt the same customer satisfaction scale, and which is NPS. If you haven't heard of that, that's Net Promoter Score. And it's 0 to 10, would you recommend this to other people? And basically the most common way that companies measure how satisfied a customer is. And what you'd expect, right, this is what everyone believes, is that if they give you a low score, that means they're not very satisfied, they're not going to stay very long. If they give you a high score, those are the ones that are really in it for the long haul. But this is what the data actually shows. It turns out there's literally no correlation between how satisfied customers say they are and how long they stay. So what's the point of all this? Where does this go? Well, it raises another big question, among other things, which is, well, if it's not that, then why do customers succeed at anything? Why? If it's not that they're happy or unhappy or satisfied or unsatisfied, what could it possibly be? Well, I had this experience that sort of turned the light bulb on for me. I was at a client who was a big client, so big we couldn't ignore them, and they were always unhappy, constantly frustrated, always complaining. And one day, after really years of this, a very frustrating experience for me, I just said to them, hey, if you hate us so much, why don't you just cancel? And the customer looked at me confused a little bit and basically said, why would we cancel when you get us such good results? And that was like, boom, the light goes on. It's not about how much they like the experience. It's about whether it's giving them the thing they came to get. And that switched my whole thinking. And it really shifted me into this new mode where I could essentially say, what if it's about results? What if it's like, what if that's the whole game? And so again, we collected data, we have this huge data set, and shockingly, by far and away, the best predictor of why customers stay is getting results. In fact, customers who get measurable results stay 6 times longer than those who don't. That's a lot better predictor than 0, which is what satisfaction provides. So, okay, it's all about results. And everything we've seen since then over the last 10 years confirms this. And in fact, this helps us understand something I think that's also quite important, which is, well, if it's all about results, then why do some customers get results? Now we're starting to get into something that I think is useful in anyone's role, even an internal stakeholder that's trying to get something adopted and get something to be successful and get traction with it. Well, this is the interesting insight, which is, if it's all about results, then the question is, why do some customers get results? And the answer is, customers get results when they change how they work. So when we look at customers who are highly successful, we can actually see they're the customers who did the thing that was necessary to get results from the product. Hopefully now it's starting to see the connection between what I'm talking about and the challenge of deploying or adopting anything like an LMS in an organization. People think, well, we've got to get it adopted. True, we have to get it adopted. The question is, why do some companies take something on and get good adoption and others don't? And it turns out it has a lot to do with this idea of results. So the way I say it is, customers don't leave when they have a reason to leave. They leave when they no longer have a compelling reason to stay, which is all about results. So now I want to talk about the importance of a plan. So whether you're in a position like I was, trying to get customers to take on something and get good results so they'll stay and keep paying us, or whether you're in a company and your whole focus is, how do I get other people to adopt this and see the value and grab hold of it? And I'm going to boil it down to something that I think might seem too simple, but it's actually really, really powerful. And that is the idea of a success plan. I love success plans because what I've seen is that when there's a success plan in place, you see, almost always you see that change and that transformation. So how do we, what's the process of producing that? Well, there's a problem, actually. Success plans are vital for two reasons. The first is that actually a lot of people don't really understand clearly enough what results we're going for. And that's important because there's a certain motivation element to it, right? When we try to change anything in our lives or in our companies, we need to know why. What's the fundamental kind of goal? Is it worth it? Why is that motivating to everyone? So we have to be clear on this. A shocking number of organizations will try to adopt something without having clarity as to why they're doing it. And then the second thing is you have to know how to get there. And once again, this is a very common missing piece. A lot of people, a lot of companies know they're trying to do something but don't actually have experience with the details of how to get it done. So we've got to solve for both these problems. That's why success plans are so important. And in a way, they solve for the why and how. You can think of the results as why are we doing this and the plan as how, okay? So not a really complicated concept, nothing new here. But what I am telling you is that this turns out at scale to be the missing element. Not only do customers stay because they get results, but fundamentally that comes down to, is there a plan in place to do that well? And so, that's where the customer results strategy comes in. Customer results strategy is simple. And one of the biggest problems with success plans is that we overcomplicate them. Success plan is just, what are those results and how are we going to achieve them? And the customer results strategy is a method I developed to simplify this process because what I found was that the vast majority of the time we were overcomplicating it. And the problem with overcomplicating is a lot of organizations struggle to make systematic changes and do something new, like put in a new system and adopt it and get everybody using it. So it's important that it not be overcomplicated, and the customer results strategy is a way of simplifying that. So I want to show that to you now. I want to get right to it, but I also want to preserve time because Danny's going to show you real ones that are going to, I think, focus your mind even better on how this works. How do you do this in practice? And what I want you to see is how unbelievably simple it is. After this call, you should be able to do this right now for your organization. So let me walk through. This is what the canvas looks like. We call this the customer results strategy canvas. There are only 4 questions we have to answer. 4 questions. What's the key result we're trying to achieve, right? How will we know when we've achieved it? That's the metric. Is there a way to measure it? How will we know? That's simple as that. What tools do we need? That's what we call the total solution. And the most important, result behaviors. What will we have to do to achieve this result? If you can answer those 4 questions, you have a killer customer results strategy. That's the kind of plan that we can build success on. So let me walk through a simple example and just show you this. But again, the real examples that Danny's going to show you, I think are going to be really helpful. But just to illustrate, the first 2 are on that why side of the equation, right? Why are we doing this? And the right is, how are we going to do it? What tools and what actions do we need to take? Okay, so here's an example. Let's say we want to decrease onboarding time for new hires. That's the fundamental result we're trying to achieve with maybe a new training initiative, right? Okay, everyone's clear. That's really important. That's the thing we've got to do. How will we know? Well, we've got to measure it. So we've got to come up with a metric. And you notice here it's got some detail. What's the metric? Well, it's onboarding time in days. And what was it before? We have to have a baseline. How else will we know if we improved, right? So it's, let's say, 45 days, and our target is 30 days. You notice it also says by Q3. It helps to say, if we have an ambitious goal, how long do we think it will take to achieve that? It might take longer the more ambitious it is, but we have to have some sense. Otherwise, again, how will we know when we've won, right? Make sense? So the key result, and by the way, the key result is typically an increase in something or a decrease in something. We want to increase the amount of sales we have, or we want to decrease the onboarding time for new hires. These are good examples of the kind of result. It's something that gets better, right? It's not just install an LMS. That's not a key result. That's a thing we're going to do, and it's not a trivial thing either. It's quite a challenging thing, but it's not the result. Why are we going to install the LMS? What's the benefit that we get from it? And if you make sure that you use the word increase or decrease, that helps you, I think, focus on the right kind of result that's in the right place, right? That it's motivating, it's clear, it's connected to the thing we're doing. Okay, so we get the key result and we know how to measure it. Then the tools. We just need to know, this is not need to be a long list, just what are the main tools we have to have in place? Do we need data? Do we need this LMS? Do we need content? Whatever, just the major points here. We do want to make sure that for a result like this, we are clear, do we have everything in place that we need? If not, we can go get that. And then last and not least, what do we have to do? So I said that the biggest differentiator between successful customers, successful companies when they do something new, and those who fail, is that the successful companies changed how they work to take advantage of the way that that new thing produces benefits. So if the benefit is faster training, it's unlikely that just installing that tool will lead to that. We have to change something. We have to do something different or new or better. And this short list is intended to help us focus around what are the things we'll have to do to achieve it. Now, you may notice something from this box, which was true for all of them, and that is there's not a lot of space. There's no room for sentences or paragraphs. That's on purpose. I told you that one of the critical elements for making a successful customer results strategy is that it has to be simple. If they're too complex, few people will engage with them. They'll be too hard to understand, and they'll just become an artifact cast at the bottom of your drawer. If you want to be successful in the results approach, in focusing on getting results and using that to improve, to build engagement, to drive success, you need an artifact, a tool that everyone can consume, that everyone understands. It's extremely simple and it's extremely clear. But there's another reason for this clarity, this simplicity. And that is that if we've got it more complicated than this, it's also probably wrong. Okay, so go with me for just a second on this. Often when we build success plans, and I did this for years, I was trying to compound in one statement multiple things. Well, it isn't just decrease onboarding time. We also want to increase the skill level, and we want to improve, the learner satisfaction score, etc. Those are all valid goals, every one of them. But if I put them all in one key result, it suddenly becomes too difficult to measure, to track. So you'll notice there's more than one row on the canvas. We could use the second row and the third row for those separate things. So the second one could be increase overall skill level. The third one could be improve learner satisfaction. This is important. Breaking them down into individual goals with clear results is how you make a hard, complex challenge simple, achievable, right? And the reality is that if it's not clear and broken down like this, we'll probably fail. Now, the other thing is, it also helps that they're in order, they're ranked, right? So it's quite important that we all know, even if we have more than one, what's the most important one, right? What's the one where I'm going to make or break the project? Because there's always one that's the most important. We need to make sure we're clear. What's our priority goal? What's the most important thing we're trying to do? And then, sometimes we'll just work on that because as an organization, we don't have a lot of resources. I don't have an unlimited number of staff and time. So I might just focus on that first one until we've got it going, and then I'll move to the second one. That's what successful organizations do to change. Does that make sense? So this is the idea of the simplicity of this. It's still just a success plan, but it has the clarity, minimum clarity for us to build effective action around. Okay, so that's the idea of a customer results strategy. So couple of additional things to think about, which are oftentimes when we go to fill this out, we don't have clarity on what that key result is. So I strongly recommend you start at the left, just like we did in my example, and go to the right. The most important thing to establish is, why are we doing this? And if it's more than one thing, what's the most important thing? Let's put them in order, okay? That is essential. What we find with a lot of companies that fail is that they fail because they don't agree on that, and they don't have the clarity as to why that's compelling, right? Not everyone in the organization cares about the same thing to the same degree. So one of the big purposes, one of the big value points of going through an exercise like this is to get everybody on the same page. What is the reason we're all doing this, and how will we know when we've won? That's just so important. Now, let's talk about measurement. So we have a bunch of research on this as well. Why isn't it enough just to say, our goal is to reduce onboarding time? We'll know when we get there. We don't have to have all this detail around how we'll measure it. Well, it turns out, this is fascinating, not only do customers who have a measurable result stay 6 times longer on average, but what happens if you break that out? What about customers who got poor results versus really good results? Well, this is where it's interesting. If you measure your result and you discover that it's bad, that it isn't improving, it turns out those customers stay twice as long as customers who don't measure their result at all. So here's this weird, maybe it seems like a dilemma. Like, why would some customers who are getting bad results and now know they're getting bad results, why would they stay longer? Well, we studied those customers. And what we find very interesting consistently is that when an organization is measuring something that matters, it builds momentum around that thing. It allows us to see, and when it's bad, when it's measured, typically the response is, well, what do we have to do to make it better? That's the right response. And that's where, if you have a challenge in your organization and it's people won't do this thing, they're not motivated, I can't get people to change. Well, one of the strategies, and it seems to be one of the very best strategies, start measuring the result. And when it's not good, show it. Always show the result. Always be tracking it, right? When we don't just save the results measurement for when it's good. We really do want to look at when does a result show up, good or bad, so that we can all gather around that and see how that's going to help us change. And what we find is, if I show you a bad result, the most common response from customers is, well, what do we have to do to improve it? Why isn't it improving? What's missing? And then we go back to the results behaviors. So typically, when I'm in Danny's situation, I'm working with a customer, I'll say, well, let's go through the list and see which one of these you got done and which you didn't. And let's figure out how to get those other things done. Because if you get these things done, these are the things that will lead to good results. That's a productive way to engage. So one of the big misunderstandings about showing results is that you wait till they're good. Then everyone's happy, you proved it worked. No, actually, the most important time to use a tool like this and to measure results is when they're still not achieving them. That's the moment when you can use this to help people sort of rally around. And then later, when results start to come in, yes, it makes a big difference, and the momentum builds, and you can get a lot more going on. So that's why this thing matters. And that's why I'll end on is just this point, okay, that we have to have a measured result, or this entire exercise is a waste of time. So I will say this, don't look at any success plan, much less this one, as an exercise you can do and then go back to work. No, this is actually the thing that should drive everything we do, and the most important thing that we'll do after defining it is to figure out how to measure. So if you, for instance, come up with a metric that's not really practical for you to measure, like we don't have the data, I don't have a way to measure it, find one that you can. it's better to find another alternative measure, maybe a proxy measure or something that isn't maybe perfect. It's better to do that than to give up measuring at all. Because what we find is that once you've done this exercise, you'll still get no benefit unless you follow it up. So I like to recommend bringing this thing up in meetings where we're talking about the project. It only needs to be on the screen for, I don't know, 30 seconds or something. But then we should always be finding a way to measure how are we doing. Maybe it's monthly you measure, or maybe it's weekly. It depends on the project, of course. But we have to have a metric. So the one thing I'll impress upon you, all of this exercise is essential to what the real activity of successful organizations is when they adopt and when they transform. And that is to have the clarity as to why they're doing it, what their plan is, and then to follow it up by saying, how are we doing? That's the most important thing. Okay, now, it's not more complicated than that. I don't want to go anywhere that implies it's more complicated, and I don't want you to think of it as more complicated. So I'm going to leave it there. I think watching Danny show you some examples is just going to be so much better in a sense than this sort of fake example that I have, because I think you'll see how this comes into play, and Danny will, I think, have a chance to share some of the details of how this works and how it's helped organizations transform. So I'm going to stop here and hand over to Danny.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg. And one thing that we need to make sure is that we are happy to share the resources. I see Luca here on the question saying, if we're going to share the PowerPoints, I think we will, right? We want to spread not only the template, but
Absolutely.
also the research and the theory behind it, because what you just explained as theory is equally as important as what Dan is going to go for right now. So again, I'm going to do the screen sharing and Danny will do the talking.
Thank you very much, Theo. And thank you, Greg, as well. Thank you for coming, everybody, today. As Theo mentioned and as Greg mentioned, what I'm going to do in this segment of the webinar is just take you through some examples with TalentLMS customers where we have drafted and validated customer results strategies with them based on their key results and based on their use cases as well, using the strategies that we've already looked at before with Greg. I'm going to just take you through these examples. So we have, in the first case, we have a customer, a TalentLMS customer in the health industry. They're using the platform for internal training to deliver compliance courses to their users, essentially. And for them, their key result was to increase the employee compliance, okay, to make sure that they were reaching the level that they needed of the completed compliance courses. So that was the first thing that we established, the key result, what we actually wanted to work on and achieve. And then that brought us into the conversation of how to look at the metrics for that. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to measure the percentage of course completions when it comes to the compliance courses, and we also set a time frame for that as well. So very important to mention, as Greg mentioned before, we had to look at a baseline first. So where is the customer, or where was the customer currently, and what was their target? So we can see we established the baseline and target, and we had a deadline or a period of time there for this measurement to take place, that being the end of this year. So once we looked at the metrics, once we established the baseline and worked out a target together, that's when we started looking at TalentLMS together and the tools available to the customer to help them to achieve this goal. So this is where we looked at different things like the learning paths, streamlining courses, making sure that the courses are accessible to the users. So creating learning pathways, specific sets of courses that the users had to follow, doing things like introducing time limits on courses to make sure that the users were completing the courses within the set time frame. For example, making use of things like automations. They have a lot of courses that require some kind of recertification, so making sure that their users are being enrolled into the courses and making sure they're recertified and being re-enrolled if if necessary. And very important, something that we were able to establish with the customer is making use of things like notifications, making sure that their users are being informed of the courses they need to complete if they haven't completed them already, for example. And something else, an extra thing we also managed to agree upon was using gamification. As you know, if you're using TalentLMS, it has various gamification features to add that extra level of engagement and incentive to completing courses in the platform. So this is something we also paired with their rollout of the compliance courses. So these were the tools inside TalentLMS that we looked at together. These were the tools that were going to help us to reach our targets, achieve our key results, focusing on the metrics, of course, that we'd established. And then very important at the end, we also agreed upon with the customer the steps that they would take in order to make sure they achieve their goals. As Greg said before, it's very important to also consider this as well. What steps are you going to take actively to achieve your goals? So this involved acquiring the compliance courses, making sure that these courses were updated regularly, making sure that they're accessible for the users, incentivizing the completion. So aside from the notifications and the gamification, making sure that they are regularly communicating to their users, to their employees about the compliance courses, making sure that they stay on track, and of course running regular audits on the employees to make sure that through reporting, running reports weekly or bi-weekly, that the customer can get a real kind of sense of what's happening with the compliance courses, how far along we are, if we are on target for the metrics that we've established already. So this was our canvas. Okay, this took place over a couple of discussions with the customer. Of course, first of all, we worked out the key result, and then from there, we worked out the metrics. Then we looked at the tools and the result behaviors as well. So I hope this example helps to kind of translate a lot what Greg was talking about into some kind of real examples and how this could perhaps apply to you when you're using TalentLMS. Of course, every use case is different. Every customer result strategy is different. That's why we have these different sections, and this is why we can open up a discussion to have a look and plan ahead what you want to achieve and how best to get there together. I think that's the most important thing here. It's a joint process between us here at TalentLMS, and of course you as well using the platform. So I also have another example to show you. So I wanted to kind of give a variety today. So first of all, we looked at a use case for internal training. Here's a use case for external training. This is a customer, TalentLMS customer, that is in the manufacturing sector. They have a network of partners and clients actually that sell their products. So for them, their key result was to increase the product adoption, improve the adoption of their product through increasing the product training that is being offered to their partners. So in the same way, once we established a clear goal, remembering that we're looking at things to increase, improve, very key decisions, very key motives. We then looked at the metrics together. So establishing a baseline of what's happening already, and again, setting a target and a period of time to achieve this target in as well. So that then led us into, again, the tools inside of TalentLMS. So how are we going to make sure that our partners, our clients are trained on the products? How are we able to make sure that we hit our targets by the end of the year through using the tools available to us in TalentLMS? So as we had a customer here that's using external training, they were separating obviously their training into different branches. So this played a big report, and running things like reporting on different branches to make sure that each branch is following the training, that they're completing the training, of course, establishing things like default groups. Having that available in each branch so that the users in this branch were assigned the the required courses that they needed to take, for example. We also discussed things like TalentCraft. This customer was quite interested in creating their own content. It was very specific content on their product. They had a lot of old worksheets and things that they wanted to sort of revamp and utilize. So we also discussed TalentCraft, and of course, white labeling the TalentLMS. Each of their partners had a different kind of branding in mind. So this really kind of opened up the opportunities there to create different training environments for their clients to help them to also, of course, train them on the product. And when we came to the result behaviors, this is something, again, that we discussed, planned ahead and agreed for the customer for what they were going to do to help them to achieve their goals. So planning the rollout of the training, very important to define the scope of the training, what kind of courses were going to be offered, the duration, the kind of content that they were going to be using. So in this case, they decided to create their own content, which is fantastic because, as you know, inside TalentLMS, we have a native course creation tool, TalentCraft. So this is something that also helped them to achieve their goals, being able to create readily available material inside of their platform using the native tools available to them. We also looked at things like importing users, making sure that their users were put into the right branches, they're registered onto the platform, for example, making sure that they were able to actually access the platform and divide up the training accordingly across their partner network. For example, incentivizing completion. So again, making use of things inside of TalentLMS like gamification, notifications, automations, but also again making sure that they're communicating regularly with their clients and having open lines of communication, making sure that they're aware of the courses that are available and what needs to be taken as well. Of course, we then looked at the tracking of progress, so the analytical side of things, making sure to actually progress when it comes to progress, tracking reports twice a week for this customer. This is something that they wanted to do to make sure that they are hitting their targets and staying on target with the metrics that we had discussed previously. And finally, they also wanted to make sure again that these courses were being communicated and marketed to their users as well. So they were thinking about issuing newsletters and weekly sort of updates to their client base to make sure that they were informed as well. So this is another case, another customer result strategy for a different use case entirely and a different result entirely, but using the same framework that Greg showed us and took us through. We were able again to focus on the specifics. So what the customer wanted to achieve, how we were going to measure this, what kind of tools we were going to use, and how this would ultimately change or alter their behavior and help them to achieve their goals through this kind of change in their behavior or through this kind of planning ahead with what needed to be done. So these are two very specific examples for two different customers. Of course, if you ever come to draft your CRS, if you're thinking about a customer result strategy, of course, there's no one size fits all here. So it's very specific. And this is a way to actually open up and focus on your goals, as Greg said. So every canvas will look different for each kind of case that you're looking at. But I think I wanted to show you some practical examples here of how this could perhaps work with TalentLMS and to help you perhaps achieve your goals as well. So perhaps this has given you a few ideas today going forward for how you'd like to move ahead. I don't want to take any more of your time today because I think we have some questions. So I hope that was helpful for you. And I think, Theo, we can move on to the next section.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Danny. And so the most important part is exactly combining the theory from Greg and, of course, the application from real examples with Danny. Now, there's a lot of questions, so I'm going to jump right into Greg. One quick answer here that I can offer to somebody called Italina. I hope I'm saying that right. So the question was, do you have a detailed ROI like in 2 or 3 years with an example using hard numbers? Well, I can tell you that TalentLMS prides into being able to show the return of investments in less than a year, approximately 10 months. So for an LMS that you only take 4 to 6 weeks maximum to set up, you can definitely see measurable results in 10 months. So definitely there is this. And of course, feel free to send us an email at success@talentlms.com, so that way we can discuss with you specific case studies, but of course, give us a bit of information about your industry and your use case. So, Greg, I'm coming right to you. I'm going to leave this on screen if that's okay, so everybody can have inspiration for more questions. So there's one from Benedict. In the customer results strategy canvas, is there any consideration for adaptability as customer needs or profile changes?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I recommend is you work this out, and typically the process involves going through and getting some results. I already mentioned a scenario where there might be more than one goal. So one possibility is that we've anticipated some of those future goals and we've already got them on there. But a really common scenario is just to have one, just like it is on the screen now. And then as your needs change or you achieve different goals, refresh it, start with a new one, come up with a new one. I think that should happen at least once a year, but for some organizations, they're going to change this because their company changed or their organizational goals changed or whatever, their needs were met in a different way. This is a infinitely expandable, changeable object. It's really a tool more than an answer. It's a way of asking the question, what are we trying to achieve and how we do it? That should change as often as the needs change, for sure.
And that's a great start on the Q&A. Let me jump right into the second one from Jonathan. Would two customer results strategy canvas be used for a client who does internal training and offers the courses for sale externally? And following that, which would come first?
Well, absolutely. If you have two goals, and in this case, you would have two different results you're trying to achieve, then you need two. Again, you could put them as two rows on the same slide, but you could also do them as two slides, especially if you're really speaking to two different groups. I wouldn't put them both on the same slide. I would want one of these, just like Danny has it here, for the groups that I'm working with. That focuses their mind. It's not going to distract them with what's going on over on the other side. I would create one for each one. And that's an important thing. For every distinct result that your organization's trying to achieve, you need to figure out how to achieve it. And that means defining it well, figuring out how to measuring it. So yeah, you make one of these for each one. Oh, and which one comes first? Well, I think I answered that. If we're speaking to the same group, then we have to pick a number one. Maybe that's not as important. Maybe they're both equally important. That's rare, but it can happen. So, okay, then I have them both on the same slide. But if I'm talking to two different groups, then there's no priority. For each of those groups, that's their priority. And we can focus just on the one.
Thank you, Greg. And I'm going to jump to Danny for this one. And there is one from an anonymous friend. There are a few customers who seem to reverse engineer TalentLMS. They join the webinars, they see the articles, they test the features, but then they're not sure how to implement them in their actual use case. Is there anything that you can share to get unstuck from this situation?
Yeah, sure. So I think, this is where ideally a CRS could work. We're talking about here perhaps a customer or users of TalentLMS that perhaps they have a good knowledge of the tools within inside the platform, but perhaps they're not that sure about how to plan ahead and how to actually achieve their goals. This is where we'd probably perhaps think about what is the key result here. What do you really want to achieve? What's your ultimate goal with TalentLMS, and sort of work backwards or work forwards from that. Essentially, go to your key result, think about what you want to achieve with TalentLMS, and then start again. How are you going to measure the metrics for this? What are you doing right now? What can we then add to that? And that would then perhaps open up the discussion for how to use the different tools. So it's great that a lot of our customers are very well informed about the tools and everything inside TalentLMS. I'm sure that's due to the webinars we offer, the rich material we have available as well. But I think really I think to really get down to it, you need to sort of think about your key result. What is the main thing you want to achieve with TalentLMS, and then plan ahead from that way. As we've seen today in the CRS, that could be a good way to open up a discussion. As Greg said, it could be a useful tool to open up these discussions. And from that discussion, then perhaps you can actually see a clearer path to using the different tools inside TalentLMS for your use case.
Thanks, Danny. And you mentioned discussion a lot. So one last question for Greg here from Gord. How do you navigate the discussion if goals are not 100% met? Do you try to plan for this or wait for it to happen? What's your tip here?
It's a great question. So one of the interesting results of our research was, well, what we noticed, right, was when you started to measure results and they started to come in, there would be this moment where the whole dynamic would change, where people would start to see the results and they would double down, they'd work harder, they'd try. So there's some feedback loop, right, between seeing results and doing better in terms of behavior change. Well, the interesting thing is, where does that happen? Like, how many results have to come in before you see this change? And we have a huge amount of data, so we've studied this. And the fascinating thing, this is not what I expected, but it's very consistent in the data, is that that happens way sooner than you think, at a way lower level of results than you think. So instead of saying, you know what, it's sort of like when we get to 80–90% of our goal, that's when people start to believe in it and that's when they change. It turns out it happens with almost any level of measurable results. When we measured it in dollars, it happened when the first dollar came in or the first hour was saved. And that may not make sense. You might think, well, gosh, why would someone, why would a whole organization suddenly become engaged? We have to remember, organizations have a hard time changing. And when they see any results, what they're actually thinking is, oh, this is going to work for us if we just put more time and if we just do it. So I encourage you, show results no matter how little they are, and you'll see already that it changes the dynamic in your organization. Very few organizations will achieve 100% of their goal in the super fast time, but it happens. I think it happens a lot with TalentLMS in particular. But what's the point? The point is, it doesn't matter. When your organization starts to feel the benefits of results, and that comes through measuring them, that's when they'll start to really take it more seriously, and you'll see that traction and that adoption and that enthusiasm building. So, most important thing, measure results no matter how much they are.
Thank you very much for that, Greg. And thank you very much for being here. Danny, thank you as well for being part of the session. And thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you for your questions. And of course, keep an eye in your inbox for the recording, the PowerPoint presentation, the resources, and of course, our email is open, success@talentlms.com, for any questions and anything that you would like to explore more. Thank you, everyone. Take care and see you next time. Bye-bye.